there. I snagged Leslie this morning and I said, Leslie, I know you're not prepared for this, but could you take a minute, and could you just share what happened at the Supreme Court yesterday? And she said she would. Thank you, Leslie. Ladies and gentlemen, Leslee Unruh is the director of the Alpha Center in Sioux Falls and Abstinence Clearinghouse. It's just an honor to have her in the house here along with our keynote speaker. Welcome, Leslee Unruh.
Well, after a lot of years and a lot of the people in this room that made a huge difference too, we were able to go to the Supreme Court yesterday morning and walk up those steps and walk in there with one of your representatives, Lynn DeSanto, and Stacy Woolman, and also we had Roger Hunt, our hero for unborn children, and we had Lynn and Langley, and we walked up and we were able to deliver this wonderful resolution that our legislature voted on. And what's happening is all across the nation, now other legislatures as well, are taking this resolution and they're putting it into their states. You're going to see it in Congress. They're going to be voting on it as well and talking about it. And it all started because of South Dakota legislature that stood strong and have been one of the most pro-life state in our nation. So what you'll see is what will happen is they will get to read this, the Supreme Court, and we're sitting in that room, seeing those 11, you couldn't take pictures, but you see those 11 chairs, and my grandfather used to say to me when I was a little girl, if you pray where your feet may tread, it is offered up to you. And so we prayed that we would, when we return in 3 years, with our law that we have in the courts right now. In fact, we will be in court for 5 weeks in Sioux Falls, and so we'll need your prayers there. In your Rapid City Pregnancy Center, led by Stacy Woolman, she was deposed 2 weeks ago from Planned Parenthood, as was I. They kept us about 7.5 hours drilling us. And so when they say, are you really going to help these women of South Dakota? Do you really have doctors and people? And under oath, Dale, I told them, yes, we are strong together, just as you said. And when the chips are down, I won't tell you a joke, we stand together. And so thank you so much, and thank you, Dale, for leading. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. You're another shero in the state of South Dakota, as well as our own Stacy Woolman and carrying that right here in town. Let's give it up for both of these ladies. If you'll turn your attention to the screen this morning, and we talked about defunding of Planned Parenthood. I don't know how many of you noticed, but just yesterday, the 10th video was released. And I'll tell you, they just keep coming. Planned Parenthood must be stopped, they must be defunded, and we're doing all that we can to see that that happens. So appreciate our Congress for sure. And ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ellen Unruh. Dr. Ellen Unruh, as you see from the bullet points here, since 1973, he has been a pro-life speaker. In 1984, he and his wife Leslie founded the Alpha Center. And then shortly after that, the National Abstinence Clearinghouse. Dr. Unruh is a chiropractor, and he is also a prolific writer and has written several books. But most important of all, he is a constitutionalist, he is a patriot, and he's in the house here today. We've been working hard at getting him to travel across the state to come be with us, but it is an honor for me to introduce Dr. Ellen Unruh to all of you here today. Welcome him, will you please?
Thank you, Dale. It's an honor to be here because I know when people who follow Dale are warriors, so it's good to be to a group of warriors. The last guy who introduced me said Dr. Unruh is one of the best speakers in the country. Of course, he said if you want to go into the city, there's a lot of them better than he is. But I'll try not to be like that preacher who got sick and this Obamacare nurse made a mistake and put a barometer down his throat instead of a thermometer, and the reading came out windy and dry. See, so it's important to see. But the preacher's job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, so I hope we accomplish one of those. But I have an optimistic message for you today. I believe it's better to light one candle than curse the darkness. A candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And one man and truth is an army, and one man with God is a majority. That's our premise of what we believe. So we have an optimistic message, and it's important to be optimistic. It's like that guy who was a drunk, and the family tried to get him to quit drinking, and nothing worked. And finally, one night when he passed out, they threw him in an open grave. They thought that would scare him out of it, so they all hid behind tombstones to see what his reaction would be. And he finally woke up around 11 in the morning, and he peeked over the edge, and all he could see was tombstones and crosses in every direction. As far as the eye could see, tombstones and crosses. And he got a grin from one eye to the next. He says, "Glory be, it's resurrection morning, and I'm the first one out." See, so the moral of the story is to be optimistic no matter how bad things look. And it's pretty bad when you look at the news. I'm not going to reiterate on all the things happening in the news because it's unbelievable. It's like our country's in a moral freefall. You know, a Cuban dissident swam through shark-infested waters to come to America. And by the mere grace of God, he got here and he was explaining to college students what it was like living under Castro. And they said, "I guess we don't realize how good we have it." He said, "No, you're not the ones that have it good. I have it good. I had a place to escape too." When thousands of students, after the wall came down in Russia, they thought thousands of students in Tiananmen Square in China, they said, "We can't kill all of us." And they all lined up in Tiananmen Square, and they were wrong. The communist regime got out their cannons and mowed them all down. And so what we have here in America was paid with a huge price. And most people today don't understand the price and the story behind it. You know, the night before Paul Revere's ride, Jonas Clark, the town preacher in a little town of Lexington, met with John Hancock and Samuel Adams, the founder of the American Revolution. Samuel Adams was a very strong patriot. He said, "If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animated contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsel nor your arms. May your chains set lightly upon you. May you lick the hands that feed you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen." These people were smart. John Hancock asked Samuel Adams, "If it comes to war, do you think the people will fight?" And Jonas Clark, the preacher in Lexington, jumped up. He said, "I know they'll fight, because I've prepared them just for that. I know they'll fight." And the next day when the British came, they said, "Don't shoot unless fired upon, but if it means war, let it begin here." And when several parishioners lay dead in the church parking lot, he said, "Let this be known as the day freedom starts around the world." And it became known as the shot heard around the world. But the rest of the story is it started in a church parking lot with a country church, with a country preacher. And churches all across America had what they call Minutemen, who would fight the British on a minute's notice. And Meilenberg gave a sermon from Ecclesiastes. There's a time to laugh, a time to cry, a time to live, and a time to die, a time for peace and a time for war. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we happen to be living in a time for war." And he took off his black robe, and he was fully dressed in military uniform. And he says, "All the men in this church who want to fight for liberty, follow me." And 350 men got out and followed him. And the British blamed the Revolutionary War on the Black Robe Regiment. If it wasn't be for all the churches, country churches all across America, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. The British said they didn't have the right to freedom of conscience. And you know, for 2 centuries, they preached about tyranny, they preached about liberty, they preached about natural rights and natural law, inalienable rights. These ideas have consequence. They didn't just come out of thin air. In fact, it all started 2 centuries before that. And social change takes place very gradually. But after the Protestant Reformation, with Martin Luther, who got struck by lightning, John Calvin heard of John Hobbes give a fiery sermon in a college, and he was converted on the spot. And he started a revival that swept Europe that became so intense during the days of John Knox, up to 100,000 were slaughtered and burned alive and tortured to death in one day. And the Christians fled to Holland. They were persecuted there, and the only place left was this country that Columbus had discovered. But out of the first 9,000, only 1,000 survived. 50% starved to death the first 3 years. We don't realize, till Governor Bradford read the parable of the talents, if you use your talent, God will give you another one. If you use 5, you get 5 more. Wow. So he gave everyone a plot of land. Whatever you grow on your own land, you get to keep. Well, we get to keep the fruits of our own labor. What a novel idea to combine the principles of Christianity and capitalism, which is spiritual, is scriptural. And it wasn't long. They took the electricity out of the clouds, the oil out of the rock, the aluminum out of the clay. They had rivers to be bridged, and cities to be built, and the mountains to be trailed, while we built the greatest country in the world has ever dreamed of. In just 200 years. You know, if there's only been 6,000 years of recorded history since the beginning of man. So if someone invented a time machine to compress those 6,000 years into 24 hours, it would mean we've only been a country for 3.5 seconds. But in those 3.5 seconds, over 50% of all the economic activity that's ever occurred in the history of the world has occurred here. 90% of mankind's inventions and discoveries have occurred here. Now, what's different about our country? That we've accomplished more in 200 years, starting with nothing, than all the previous 6,000 years of world history. But we're the only nation with a creed, one nation under God. What does nature's law and nature's God mean? The nature of fish is to swim, the nature of birds is to fly, the nature of man is not to be enslaved. Well, where did that idea come from? Our forefathers believed and understood that every human being is created in the image of God Almighty, slightly less than the angels, which is better than slightly higher than the apes. And if you live in freedom, you can soar like the wings of angels, like the wings of eagles, and develop your God-given talent only if you live in freedom. And they believed that and understood that, and they fought for that. The right to worship God was more valuable than life itself. How many of you ever seen the movie The Crossing? The price that was paid. George Washington, the night before, on Christmas Eve, he said he decided to attack the Hessian army. On Christmas Eve, he said, they'll be drunk, they'll never expect us to attack them. And he met with his generals, he said, what are your thoughts on this? And one said, I'll not allow our men to go to such a slaughter. Okay, give me your reasons. He said, first of all, 80% of your men have deserted you. You've only got 2,000 men left. He said, we got about 14, 15, 16-year-old guys, boys, fighting grown men, the most well-trained militia. They're savages. Our men are scared to death of them. They shot us in the back in the last battle when we tried to surrender. He said, we're outnumbered 20-1. We haven't had rations in 3 weeks. Half our men don't even have shoes. They said you could tell where Washington's army was by the blood in the snow. He said, last, he said, we don't have any ammunition. He said, need I say more? And George Washington said, yes, everything you said is true, and why these 2,000 men are still following me, God only knows. But I am their general, and if we don't fight this battle, the war's over. All the media said, this is the stupidest war in the world. And he said, Sergeant, take this general out of the camp. If he tries to recruit any men, I want you to shoot him. He said, you wouldn't dare. He said, try me. Well, ice was floating in the Delaware River while the boats with all the men crossed the Delaware. If a horse would have reared up, they'd have all just died. They had to march 7 miles afterwards. One died just in the march on the way there. Starvation and exhaustion. They won that battle. He said, how many men we lose? He said, none. He says, how many wounded? He said, none, sir. The providence of God. You know, George Washington won the Revolutionary War by losing 80% of the battles. He lost more men to starvation, freezing to death, and desertion than he ever lost in battle. He referred to the providence of God 280 times in his writings. It's impossible to govern without God in the Bible. The right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is inalienable. It's nature's law, nature's God. No government, no courts can ever interfere with our inherent natural rights. It's beyond the authority to repeal God's law, any more than they can vote to repeal the law of gravity. But see, we are in war today, but it's worse than ISIS is an ideological war for the heart and soul of our country. A battle for the minds of man, an idea that says each individual, nobody has moral right to determine their future, one side says. that mankind is no longer economically responsible for his own welfare, nor is he morally responsible for his own conduct. But where did that ideology come from? Well, it started in the 1820s. A guy by the name of Hegel said, there's no God. Why, we're all God. God is a figment of your imagination. And Feuerbach comes along a few years later, said, well, if there's no God, there's no truth. Why, what's true for you may be not true for me. If enough people think something's right, that'll make it truth. Moral relativism is like a professor said. There's no God, there's no truth, there are no absolutes, nothing's for sure. And a student raised his hand, he said, are you sure about that? He said, absolutely. He said, what you just said true? He said, yes. He said, well, you just said there was no such thing as truth. So what you just said was a lie. This professor has his feet planted firmly in midair. He has what's known as paralysis of the analysis. And I've got a scientific word to describe that philosophy, and the word is nuts. But this is what's taught in our schools, moral relativism. Everything's relative. As fact, well, Darwin comes along, if there's no God of truth, where do we come from? We come from the slime. Well, the earth fell off the sun 93 million miles, kept at a 37-degree angle, give us the 4 seasons. Oxygen's 21%, hydrogen 78%, just enough to sustain life, and somehow a lightning bolt hit a mud puddle, and that's how the first cell was formed. They kept dividing and mutating until we had birds and animals and trees and people and fish and thousands of species. It just happened. Well, astrophysicists just a few years, front page article said it's impossible for the universe to have evolved. It had to have happened in a nanosecond. It had to have been created. It's now been proven scientifically. Well, see, Darwin comes along. He read, or Karl Marx, who read Darwin, said if all there is materialism, no God or truth, we need to divide the wealth. It's not fair that some have more than others. A student at USD last year said, I believe from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. What are your thoughts on that? I said, well, the guy who said that was Karl Marx. Over 100 million people got slaughtered because of his philosophy. He drank blood every week. He worshiped the devil. He dedicated his book to Lucifer. His kids committed suicide. 6 people went to his funeral. He was a madman. What is it about him that appeals to you? And he didn't know what to say. His socialistic doctrine is drawing crowds of 20,000 now in the United States of America that are cheering divide the wealth. And you know, comes Freud with no God or truth. What's the purpose of life? Well, it's sexual gratification. Man is motivated by pleasure. Unrestrained sex with no moral restraints. And it's just here for fun. You know, and the problem today we have constant is bread and circuses like Rome. They give them enough bread, free welfare, and distract them. And today, Hosea 4:6 said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We live in a time where knowledge is more prevalent than it's ever been since the dawn of history. You can look at your iPad or iPhone and get world history in a matter of seconds. You can learn how to make a turkey. There isn't anything you can't learn in a matter of seconds. But the paradox is, we're so informed, we don't know anything about anything. And there's so much distraction, nobody has a philosophy of life that makes an ounce of sense. I saw a bumper sticker that said, honk if you believe in anything. And that's the problem. Nobody has a worldview. Postman wrote a book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. We have thousands of CDs and DVDs and Twitters and Facebook and YouTubes and all the different ways to distract our mind that nobody takes the time to develop a philosophy that purpose to life. That's why suicide. By the day and age, suicide is the second cause of death among young people. We're sending young people out on the stormiest sea of life with no fixed stars, no compasses, no anchors, and no rudders. And we wonder why they end up shipwrecked on the seashore of life. We have a big job to do to teach the principles to the next generation. Ronald Reagan said freedom is not inherited in our bloodstream. This little Constitution, the words in this little Constitution have to burn in the hearts and minds of every generation, for it is never more than one generation away from extinction. We can read about it, we can talk about it, we can sing about it. How many have read it? How many understand it? And today, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. William Penn said, you'll either be ruled by God, or you'll be governed by God, or be ruled by tyrants. And the paradox today, the big challenge is, When our forefathers argued, if we let people govern themselves, they'll rape, rob, and murder each other. And John Adams says, yes, freedom without virtue is madness. Freedom requires two things: virtue and individual responsibility. Without that, there is no freedom. And so they argued, and John Adams, James Madison said, it does little avail to the American people if laws are written that are so voluminous that nobody can read them, so incoherent nobody can understand them. They're altered and modified before they're promulgated, and subject to interpretation so nobody can know what the law meant yesterday, what it means today, or what it means tomorrow. That's why the agenda of the liberals have their bills 1,500 pages. Nobody reads them. Nobody read the Iran deal. Nobody read the Obamacare. The Supreme Court said, don't make us read it. That would be cruel and unusual punishment. So we're passing rules and regulations and laws that are binding the American people and destroying our freedom. The Constitution starts out, we the people. It doesn't say they the power brokers. The Constitution belongs to us, not to the courts. We don't get our freedom from the courts. We don't get them from the Congress. We don't get them from the Senate. They're there. There's strict limitations on the power of government, and they have usurped that authority time and time again. And it's time for us to take our country back. You know, John, Herbert Hoover once said, we're treating symptoms instead of causes in this country. We expect things to come out of our people that haven't been put in there. And we got to start home by home, community by community, organization by organization, and instill back into our people those reliable traits of character and responsibility on which this country was founded. Now, I just wanted to end up with a story that illustrates the value of what we're talking about. It's a poem called The Old Violin. It goes like this. 'Twas tattered and worn, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin. But he held it up with a smile. What am I bid for this old violin? Who'll start the bidding for me? $1, $1, $2, $2. Who'll give me $3? $3 once, and $3 twice, and $3 going for $3. But a gray-haired man in the back of the room came forward and picked up the bow. He wiped the dust off the old violin and tightened the loose strings and played a melody pure and sweet as carol an angel sings. Well, the music ceased. And the auctioneer, in a voice that was quiet and low, said, what am I bid for this old violin? As he held it up with a bow. $1,000, $1,000, $2,000. Who'll give me $3? $3,000 once and $3,000 twice. And going and gone, said he. Well, the people cheered. Some of them cried, we don't quite understand what changed its worth. Then came the reply, it was a touch of the master's hand. And many a man with life out of tune, shattered and worn with sin, is auctioned cheap like by the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once and going twice and going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the master's head. What's your life worth? When the master comes, he touched the life of Martin Luther, which turned the lives upside down of 580 million people. John Calvin started a revolution that resulted in the United States of America. Jonathan Edwards started a revival, what they call the Great Awakening. All the youth rebelled, and George Winthrop. And it turned into a revival that changed the course of history. If this generation, and I really think when we think about the presidential race, people all across America, 32 states in a row, voted for marriage between a man and a woman. They didn't evolve with the president. They're good, godly Christian people. And I just close with this illustration. I spoke at a Reclaim in America conference with Governor Huckabee once, and he spoke ahead of me. And he took his daughter to the Holocaust Museum in Israel, and he wanted to see it, and she was only 11 years old. He just had his daughter with him. He said, she's kind of young to see this, but I don't want to miss this. If it's too hard on her, I'll just leave. So he held her hand, and they walked into the boxcar, and you could almost smell the stench of what happened during that time. And he said, we went through every exhibit. I held her hand, we never said a word. And it took us 2.5 hours to read everything in that museum. And afterwards, there was a place to sign your name and write a comment. And my daughter stepped in the step stool, signed her name, and started to write in the comment section. He said, what is she going to say? She's 11 years old. He said, I was so curious, I leaned over her shoulder, she wrote 5 words that will burn in my heart forever. Why didn't somebody do something? Why didn't somebody do something? The threshold of America at a crossroads. Too many politicians say, well, what about the next election? Well, what about the price paid for freedom by our forefathers? Each of us has to ask, if not you, who? If not now, when? We have to do something. Thank you.